Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lunch Tech and Chat. And today we've got our first guest. Finally, Will. Finally, we've got a guest.
Finally, we got the first. Yes, it was hard. It was us like Andre pinging me the other day asking me to start fucking interviewing people. I'm like, oh no, okay, told me. Okay, so we have our first guinea pig with us today. Okay, so Joey is both of you guys, you're both, being long-term friends. I've known Andre for more than 10 years now. And Joey, probably about 3-4 years ago, I think it was our first
Four,
chat in that
5
pub in
years.
Sydney.
wow.
No,
Oh my gosh. I was trying to remember when it was actually. It was in that pub.
it
And
was in
then
a
from
pub.
there, and then we invited you to begin block, I think 9 or 7 or 8 for blockchain
It
governance
was a
initiative.
bunch of people out of I think it was a conference that happened. And
It was like
then
after
a
party.
bunch of people, everybody drank quite a bit and ate and everything. And then after that, most people actually went away to do whatever with their lives. And we stayed for another, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours still chatting. I think
Wow,
it was.
yeah. Was it the blockies in Australia? Wow, man. I actually would try. I was speaking to my fiance the other day, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, catch up with Will again. And she's like, how did you meet Will? And I'm like, I don't remember. I remember
Don't
a lot of our
remember.
conversations, but I don't remember how we met. I must have been very drunk that night.
Yeah. So here, yeah. So Joey's our first guest here in the podcast. We'll just, just keep like the way that we always run this. Is always a convo between me and Andre up into the stage, and now we are opening up for guests, friends, family, wider family that is actually opening up, and Joey's our first one. So Joey, yeah, who are you? Where do you come from? In which planet did you start your life, and which planet are you going to live for the rest of your days? So
Thanks, mate. So I was born on the Gold Coast. So shout out to the Gold Coast. I lived most of my life in Australia, and for similarly living in Australia, I actually spent a lot of time in the blockchain industry in Australia. I started off building mining rigs with my dad and my brother when I was a teenager, which is so exciting. Um, my journey around blockchain was some of the coolest experience. Most people came from traditional finance, or they came from, I don't know, tech, and just was interested about how this technology works. Myself, I was a teenager. My dad's like, "Hey, we're building a mining rig from like a GTX 680, and this is 2012." And he's like, "You wanna help?" And for back then, like the rule is that if we want a computer, we have to build it ourselves. Dad would order the parts, whatever, we had to build it. And we're like, "Okay, cool, let's go manage this." And so back then, like it was like Bitcoin had just moved from like CPU based mining to GPU based mining,
yeah,
because obviously the algorithm getting more difficult, and then the difficulty was increasing, and competition was like rapidly increasing too. And we started to see that as well in the industry when we started seeing some of the biggest players in the world, like Chainalysis, coming up in like what 2012 or so, and some other large
2012, yeah.
enterprises.
Fremont Gox days kind of thing.
Exactly, because everyone's capitalizing off like, wow, like the overflow of Mount Gox was just coming off to other countries. In Australia, having some of the largest capital flows in the world, there was bound to have some people who were interested to again, say the word again, but capitalize on it. Anyway, so we as a family, we're just building mining rigs for years, up until the point
That's really
around
cool.
2018 and so, where we actually, I think we peaked with around 40 GTX 1070 Ti's. But then the promise of Ethereum soon waned. And the promise of Ethereum was that we will always be ASIC proof. and it was not true.
Yes.
It hit a certain point, right, where ASICs were involved, and it was just it wasn't viable to do mining. So we shelled 40 GTX 1070 Ti's, and only recently in the last 2 or 3 years, my dad and I have like made some AI servers out of them, because they're you can do some SLI over them. However, they are very, it's still not as efficient, but it's just better than paying some cloud service provider when we want to have like privacy reserved AI inference at home, which is really
Yeah.
cool. But beyond that, my journey kind of went on from like making mining rigs and actually not believing in Bitcoin or altcoins. I didn't actually believe in any of this stuff. I was like, this is magical internet money. The government's not going to accept this. This is ridiculous. But it was a way that I could connect with my father, my brother, and it was fun. And as well, like, we were mining Ethereum when it was like $37 a pop. And that was like, I don't know how many years ago. Well, most that's been sold off though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, but my journey continued, and I started working in traditional finance and like mortgage brokering with an amazing gentleman called Chris Bates. He actually runs one of the biggest mortgage brokering firms in Australia. It's like his first employee. And I produced his podcast back then, which is Elephant in the Room, which became the Australian Property Podcast, which is the biggest property podcast in Australia. And I produced it for a couple of years. And then I got into ventures. And I was super young at the time, super fresh. And I'm like, I want to go make an exchange. And anyone who is not a lawyer or doesn't have like an MBA or worked in traditional finance who says, I want to go make an exchange, they're going to have problems. And soon enough, we had some pretty big problems. We were able to raise capital, which was amazing. We raised like $250,000. However, well, what happened? We don't want to go to jail, and we needed a lot of regulation, and Australia was not ready for that. And we had some gamified attributes around the whole premise is that we want people to have recurring bill payments, and we want to have a cash back in a way. Like the more that you're actually exchanging, the higher chance you pull part of the fund. So we would distribute about 20% of the revenue into like a bounty, and the bounty would be redistributed back. And so one of my co-founders with a was extremely smart guy. I think he's working at one of the insurance firms at a high level right now. I don't want to say his name, but he.
It's all good.
But in any case, he was a really smart guy. He made this amazing model, but we just realized that it was not right for us at the time, and so we closed it down. I would spend every single night thinking about this, working on it every single day, and it was really hard for me. And then I got into Frankie One, and I started leading most of the crypto clients. So I work Frankie One it unifies all the complexities around data sources and IDV for biometrics, KYC, ML into a single API, which is amazing for blockchain. And so I started becoming friends with all these amazing, institutions like Binance. I think we closed Binance globally for KYB. So if you ever used KYB, that was me back in the day, which is really exciting. Coinbase, Kraken, FTX at the time, before Jamie Kennedy was, on from FTX to then OKX to what it was a KuCoin right now. I love that man. You have to bring on Jamie Kennedy as a guest. He's a weapon. And so just to kind of and a long story short around all of that is I moved on from there into my first consulting, which is NeoBills. And from NeoBills, I expanded to Solbis. My first client brought me to Monaco, which I spoken from a pretty amazing audience. One of the founders of Netflix was there. And it was around how you're onboarding the next 100 million people to Web3. And I said something a bit different to a lot of panelists, which is that do what traditional finance is doing. Do what Web2 is doing. Don't try to be Web3 too much. I was like, you want to make it easy, super convenient. Like Web3 is a pain. Like even working in the industry, we're using private keys, working with the technology for many years. I still find it a pain in the ass.
It still is, for many things,
But look at what Web2 did. And so that was my premise. And then I spoke at ECC in France, and I just kept going on and speaking to her. Then came back. Solbis was amazing. We worked with a bunch of high net worths on like Fireblocks integrations, building the back end of like the digital asset, like treasuries for their family offices, through to working with Zepto on like their the CBDC project with the DFCRC. We did a few crypto legal projects, one of which I really can't wait until it goes public. But I was the head of research for a lawsuit against two founders of some of the biggest blockchains, one of the biggest blockchains in the world, and they were claiming that there was like the plagiarism and that the technology they created was non-novel, and so I had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Not I had to prove. I had to be independent, obviously, but I had to research this, and I found the answer. But still, after 3 years now, the lawsuit hasn't gone public yet, and I can't talk about who it was about. However, when it does come out, it'll be really exciting to discuss that. But it was one of my favorite gigs I ever got to do. And now I love it.
Happens as Web3, despite the whole open source ecosystem that it surrounds. People are still kind of like, suing each other, right?
It was a difficult one, actually. That one was really challenging because the original like complaint was that he plagiarized, and like because AI was coming out at the time, it was actually very easy to prove that there was plagiarism because you could use AI tools at the time that made it much easier to compare like white papers. And I was doing a lot of white paper reviews and authorship, and you found that like there was some keywords that were like someone just went to the thesaurus and just changed one word out of a sentence, and you're like, okay, no, this is like 99% sure this person is plagiarized. Even like word count for certain words was the exact same, or like even like some of the even some of the scripts that the inposted into the document were literally like the same thing. However, they just changed like the loop function a tiny bit, and so it was like the same. It was the same function. Anyways, that was Solbus. Moved on from Solbus, right, onto SingularityNet, where I work closely with Dr. Ben Gertzel, some of like the strategy team, like Jen Adams, Alexei Blagarev, and I was part of the strategy team. You know, SingularityNet, we had around 250 FTEs. Our team was like 4 or 5 people. We were all the way from Ecuador, Spain. I was in Australia and Israel, and then Alexei was over in Russia and Dubai and Thailand. And so we worked very hard on like a bunch of AI agents. We worked very hard on how AGI could be approached with cryptocurrencies. We looked at a lot of like cloud computing and AI and crypto, even like looking at how like generative AI and generative AI clients that we're talking to and what they were implementing. We even spoke to some of the biggest novelists in the world around how to make complex knowledge graphs around their universes so they can generate new novels based off like complex relationships or like time dependent relationships. And then I moved on from there to Near, and I've been at Near since then. I only finished up there most recently. However, I was the founder success manager, so I work with around about 100 or so startups and enterprises that were leveraging everything from Near Intents through to our Near AI solutions, and then now most recently the Calyx Launchpad, which is the world's first intent-based launchpad. But yeah, I've had a really amazing experience. But I've stuck in this industry despite everything else because I just love it. I was born it right. Yeah, as you have like the Smiths of blacksmithing, you have the Beverleys of blockchain. And my dad's pretty quiet about his work around blockchain, but I think you have his messages. I think you have his phone number. Well, you can call whenever you want.
I think after about like 4 years ago when we had like our first meeting gathering, I think we reconnected when you had joined SingularityNet. I think that was actually at that point in time. That
cool.
And then because you and Mitch, you guys had organized the conference with Begin Network. I think when was it? Like maybe 2000.
Man, honestly, all these years are blending together, but I remember actually just on that quickly, we had Will on a panel who represented like the decentralized stablecoins. We had MJ from Novati and AUDD representing like regulated stablecoins. And then we had Mark Staples, who was representing CBDCs. We had 3 people with 3 different opinions of like stablecoins on this one conversation. There were people from the US State Department. There was people from the Bank of Japan. It was amazing. I think Will, just shout out to you, an amazing conversation.
On the most radicals to the most conservative of this space. But it was actually a really good panel. Actually, it was good, and I'm quite happy that happened at the point in time that it happened because it was a bit of, I guess, precursor to this effective happening actually in this last cycle where some of those 2 ecosystems are becoming maybe a little bit less angry with each other and maybe saying like, if this is to become the future of finance, you gotta have to marry or kind of commingle somehow, right? I think that's kind of commingling. It's probably a more proper word than marry. I don't think the marriage will ever become a full-fledged marriage. It will be more like
they'll find the purpose,
exactly, yeah.
You can find that purpose. Like, I think after the Genius Act, we're going to start seeing more tokenization-based principles coming out in the US. And I think that's going to change everything. Because, like, if you look at the Genius Act, for instance, that's like, I think 7 or so assets that you're able to use to reserve your stablecoin. Most of it's obviously treasury bills. However, in the future where you can have, tokenized-based financial assets and other kind of securities or commodities, then that may change exactly what, then they may actually be commingled in a way because you could have like tokenization principles applied so that CBDCs, potentially, not that America is very keen on CBDCs. However, if a country wanted to, they could follow some of the US principles and start to make part of their own laws around that. But you completely agree. They're all coming together now.
Yeah. Australia is probably going to be one of the ones that are going to be trying to push for a CBDC, I think, on chain. I got the feeling because of the FCRC kind of like, I mean, that's kind of what they paid.
Mark's to stop. Mark's a smart guy. Mark Staples, Dr. Mark Staples, the DFCRC, who's the CTO. He's a lovely guy. You should actually get him on the podcast. He is like, I wouldn't say too much. He's just so much fun. He's a lot more funner than you think that a guy is actually running a stablecoin. I remember a few conversations we had with Carol House. She was a former director of innovation of the White House under Joe Biden. I remember I was in a conversation with her and Mark Staples, and just such a funny conversation where they come from two completely different worlds, but they're all kind of like human. Like, and it's amazing to see, like, after all these years, real humans actually being in positions of power that can influence this technology in a really positive way. Because I was really fearful that, like, looking at CBA, the attrition that happened after the first pilot project with blockchain, or even in the ASX, after that, or the Treasury Department, right? Like, there was enough attrition where these really smart people in positions of power were ridiculed or didn't really have enough resources, and they just left. They went on to, like, MakerDAO, for instance. They went on to their own consulting firms. But I think now seeing people actually feeling comfortable to be in positions of power and to be privacy preserving, people, or pro technology or pro cryptocurrencies is amazing, and it makes me so excited for the future.
Yeah, and interesting to see. I guess the garage project that actually started with your dad and yourself, and then kind of like evolved into a career, right? So it's like she kind of like I love those types of stories because it's kind of like when you play. I mean, both me and Andrea, we've got like young kids of our own, so like, but the thing that I still haven't actually thought about actually building, I don't know about you, Andre, but the thing that I haven't thought about building was a mining rig with like some of my with
Not a mining ring. I had one at
yes.
my house when I was younger, but just to say, but yeah, no. I do play with AI a lot with Sophia. Like, I think it's really important for kids that are growing up now just to understand what is AI, how AI works, because that's just gonna be part of the future. But yeah. Joey, you've got like an amazing experience. Like, Will knows you is the first time that I'm hearing all your story, and that's amazing. And just looking at your background, like when you started, and I know you sort of started to bond more with your dad and your brother, like as a fun thing, but do you still see sort of crypto as this thing that will give people freedom, and the blockchain is gonna be this underworld where everyone was gonna be able to do anything? Or are you starting to, and I'll say realize because that's how I feel it, but starting to realize that the world is just shifting technology from how we do things currently to being the blockchain, but regulations and everything will still apply. It's just a new technological way of um, playing with money, let's say. Is that how
Yeah,
you
no,
see it, or how are you seeing the future?
no, it's a really good question.
Bring both the radical and the radical, the idealist, and also the maybe the um um let's say the marriage of the two, and let's see where your
No,
mind
I'm just
takes.
saying this because Will and I've been involved on MakerDAO with Will in the past, and just seeing like how some people think about crypto is just a bit crazy that people haven't realized like you actually live in an adult world and not in the wild wild west. Like,
Unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. So carry on.
Yeah. So no, first of all, it's a great question. Like, I like the approach that Will said around the idealist, the radical, and the marriage of them. Right. So I think I think even another version of it is just the base case, right? In any case of any technology or any kind of community, because the technology is not like the community of traditional finance, it is its own unique culture and personality. That's when Web3 and blockchain as a whole. You're going to have your niche groups. You're going to have your privacy preserving groups that will take Zcash and Monero over anything else, right? You're going to have the groups, right, who do not care and only going to be buying NFTs. You're going to have your groups, right? And I think that is one of the positive natures of blockchain, because yes, I think that truly, I do think in the most radical case, that traditional finance is now taking over a lot of blockchain, not in a bad way. It's just supplementing the funding that it actually needs. Blockchain for a long time has been self-funded, as in like people have been funding its they make some investments, they do well investments, sell investments, they reinvest, right? Like the golden handcuffs of blockchain was so much so because most of the reasons because of very difficult off ramps. With less off ramps, less ability to buy and sell, and the scrutiny from banks on buying and selling cryptocurrencies, it meant that it was better to keep your currencies within the chain. So for the most part, blockchain has been self-funded, and now finally there's customers. And the customers are those who are leveraging, stablecoins, leveraging, these new financial vehicles, right? They've been leveraging things like BitTensor and, a distributed computation, right? Which I'm a huge fan of, right? I think it's one of the first use cases, one of the first blocking use cases that actually has real customers and actually making really amazing revenue and still benefits the community by redistributing revenue. So my radical case is that they're going to take over. However, whenever you see like a bank collapse, whenever you see like interest rates rise, right, any kind of radical like symptom of the financial system, what happens?
shock
Monero
or
pumps. Well, Zcash pumps, right? Bitcoin goes down. You start to see privacy coins going up right away. And it's kind of weird because Bitcoin was the hedge against digital finance, but it seems like, these privacy coins are doing what Bitcoin used to do, 5-10 years ago. And that's my kind of feeling and vibe around the future of cryptocurrency. I do feel like AI is going to have a really huge place to play within blockchain, right? The symbiosis between the technology is pretty amazing. When you start to see the balance between the enablement of the technology of blockchain, providing the space to have, instantaneous communication, atomic swaps, right? Smart contracts, even private keys. The chances that an AI agent will be using a bank account or a credit card is close to zero because they can't complete KYC in the first place. They can't even complete the basis of regulation to be able to onboard what would be a independent economic actor. But in crypto, they can manage private keys pretty well. So it seems like AI is kind of potentially matched up with blockchain pretty well, and that's what I was working a lot on with and I found success within Near. And then as well, like AI provides a significant boost to blockchain because guess what? Now you have not only do you have new independent actors, you have 100 million of them. You have 1 billion of these independent economic actors, and they're not transacting 10 to 20 times per month. They're transacting 10 to 20 times per second, right? Or within a block time, or within a multiple block times, right? And that's really, really exciting, right? People don't understand that if you can have these independent actors, it changes you. And so that's why you have like Arbitrum and Optimism and Near and all these other chains, right? They're putting a lot of money into what? AI agents being deployed, right? Like Elisa OS was a great example of that. Not that I believe in it at all. I think it's a complete scam, and they have no money in the DAO. If you actually look at the DAO contract, the DAO contract is completely zero, despite the fact that the token represents the amount of money in the DAO, and there's nothing in there. So
yeah.
it's gonna turn out. You can leave that in, or you can cut that out, right? But I just want to quickly, shout out that that will always happen as well. So in terms of just wrapping up the question, radical case, digital finance is going to really make a big play into it. It is also finding its ground within new technologies with AI, and then marrying of it will be beneficial. Like I think that some people will say like within 5 years we're going to have tokenization schemes. I still think that's pretty far off. I think that when you start to tokenize maybe one thing, right, you're going to do okay. But even like with tokenization being around like Dubai for a long time, for a relatively long time, I would say, it's still so far from any real adoption beyond like, oh, like I have some representative asset. But when you look at like true tokenization, you mean that there is a connection between the bill of sale through to the title ownership, right, through to the ability to buy, sell, trade, reissue, new issuance, right? It's a much more fuller market that doesn't exist yet, or an economy doesn't really exist yet properly because mainly the technical gaps between traditional systems and these novel systems, it just do not exist. And so there's a lot more hurdles to get through to get there.
Yeah,
That's my thought.
Yeah, probably like the native issuance as well. From some perspective, will require us some level of tokenizing. For example, like government activities on sales at that point in time, right, where the government will itself use the leverage, the ledger as its primary issuance, and there will not be additional reconciliation at the back that you're effectively doing two mirrors, right? One that is when there's actually the government activity, government bond, and the other thing which is like they mirror whatever actually activity that is actually happening off chain. Yeah. So
and as well, like the same layer. Like once things live in the same layer together, like that's why I'm very pro CBDC, because once things have a CBDC, you can have a derivative of CBDC which may interact within a public blockchain. And then you can actually have a direct reserve of assets. It could be like if you create a new DeFi protocol and you want to bankroll your initial DEX, for instance, right? Maybe you could put in this new CBDC derivative in there. But that's only going to be possible when they live on the same technical plane. Right now, they do not. They live in the digital world and the analog world, right? But that's when, like, once everything starts to live in the same digital world, it makes it much easier for atomic transactions with like full, complete, absolute atomic transactions can only occur with the same digital plane. That's why when you trade like one DAI for one USDC cross chain on the same chain, right, it works perfectly because we can have those atomic swaps occur because they exist equally.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, like that case of the marriage. So you're actually pretty much kind of like making the case for the marriage instead of the
Yeah,
the
exactly.
case of
Yeah,
the radicalism or the
I'm pro
idealism
marriage.
from marriage. I'd like actually to touch a little bit more, and this is definitely gonna, I guess, open even
Can of worms.
a few boxes, a few additional Pandora boxes there in Andre's mind. So when you were talking about all of the work that, for example, the likes of Arbitrum and others are investing in building that economy of instantiated agents that will effectively be the drivers of flows in the native internet money and the native internet network of money. How do you actually imagine this operating? Right, I guess that if I'm my question is more like beyond the hype of agents, because we talk a lot about this actually here in the podcast, me and Andre. I mean, Andre builds agents for a living pretty much these days, and and I do Web3 stack for a living. But I guess your point there really crosses both of our paths, which is like my understanding is that the premise is that, like, well, we're enabling kind of like an economy where all of these instantiated agents will be transacting and trading all time, real time, and that will create actually the flow through, I guess, internet native networks of money. How do you see that? How do you see that, I guess, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? And I'm not asking for a crystal ball, which is really hard actually for any of us actually to have, but how do you see that actually evolving from now on?
So it's a great question, but the funny thing is it's already happened. Most of blockchain actually is bots. Like most of blockchains that are trading are bots on behalf of really smart people that have programmed these essentially what are like basic scripts for the most part, because blockchain has to be quite simple with how you interact with it. Um, and then they execute a trade, and then obviously there's some savings, right? It's very rudimentary. It's not intelligent, right? Now the future is that most of these bots will probably be upgraded in the coming, I'd say 2 or 3 years, in a pretty short time, maybe in a year or 2 years, to be more intelligent, right? To have like stop losses, right? To be able to preserve and reserve assets, right? To not have to have manual intervention, right? Potentially to hold part of the keys themselves. That's the first iteration that I start to see around AI agents. The more kind of complex, like 5, 10, potentially 15 years in the future, right, of AI agents. And that's the timelines I hope it to be done by. Not that it's starting, but to be finished, is that when you have these other AI agents that can represent a multitude of different functions or purposes, let's say, for instance, you have a data agent. The data agent could be a data broker. They could be, sourcing and finding data that exists online and internet or even a blockchain. And they're looking to send requests to buy, sell, to broker on behalf of others, right? You might have a data agent that actually could just be a storage agent. It could potentially have the ability to, store for a fee based off data that you want to buy, sell, receive, or store, right? You could have a training agent, which is actually learning around the source model that you're using, and offering you mockups like, hey, I'm gonna improve the model by the data that you've used or the training. Right, all you have to do is structure the data or your training data in this format, provide it to me, right, and provide me your base model, and I can provide you a new version. Obviously, this is very far in the future. But then when you start to see that, you start to see independent economic actors, not in the financial actors, but actually in this economy they're creating, these micro guilds they're creating, right? So potentially, like, I'll send you guys the Denver keynote that I did on, blockchain and AI. But essentially, let's say, for instance, you have a translator agent that's translating your conversation. Now that translator may be able to sell that data onto the data broker, right? And then it has to go on to buy compute. So it goes to Aether, it goes to Kudos Computer, it goes to BitTensor, whatever, right? It's going to go somewhere, and it's going to interact with some kind of compute. And then it's going to have to buy, sell. It's within interacting with a single translator, it might have interacted with 10 other agents, right? And potentially made you money. Now, you can't really do that. You can do that in the Web2 world, but it's very clunky. It doesn't have very smooth payment rails, and it's very expensive to do, right? However, when you have that are like, either like on-prem AI agents to even cloud AI agents that have their own private keys, they could do this seamlessly on a single blockchain. And one of the pieces of technology that I was working on at Near was Near Intense, where like, I think I showed you this a while ago, where you could transact like a native Bitcoin, right, on Bitcoin network. And you want to say, I want to sell 1 Bitcoin on Bitcoin network for, let's say, Ether on Ethereum. Now, if you want to do that in traditional sense, you would have to wrap the Bitcoin, have the designation address, right? Wait for the bridging, finally get the Bitcoin, then go to a DEX, then to swap, right? And you've already lost your fees. And it may take you quite a bit of time. However, with Intents, it does it in a few seconds because it uses an Intents-based routing instead. Now, the reason why they create that is because AI agents do not need to deal with those kind of complex, heavy functions of blockchain that we are so used to, like bridging, wrapping, swapping, right? For them, it's like, I have this, you have that, I want a swap done, right? It makes it simpler and simpler
Yeah,
for
how
AI
does it do?
agents.
How do you know that it moved from one chain to the other? Because when you're wrapping, you're sort of like stocking that asset to creating the other side. So you've got one to one, so you carry on. How do
Yeah.
you, yeah, so
So
how does that actually work?
So how it works is that you have, and obviously the spinny hats at Near Intense can probably say it better than myself, but essentially how it works is that you have a router service, right? And you have USDC and stablecoins as the kind of perfect medium that allows the swapping of currencies. So what happens is that when you apply, let's say I want to do an intent, a router will be able to see the intent, and then they will determine the fastest path to achieving that intent, right? And so it could be potentially for them to using, because with MPC, you're able to have, spin up private keys for wallets across multiple chains at once, right? You may have a signature that can sign to buy the Bitcoin for the, let's say the solver, for the solver network, sorry. And then for that, then it's able to have the USDC buy the Bitcoin, and then it has Bitcoin ready to go, and then it transacts it natively. So it receives the Ether at the a nominal price and slight markup, and it sends the Bitcoin natively because it creates an MPC network primarily. But I will send you the documentation. There's much better
It's
people can
really cool.
describe it for me. But it's an amazing technology, and Near is not the only one. However, the other biggest, and I think they've done like, I think when I was working hardest, it was like 2 billion. Now they're at 5 billion or so in transaction volume, and they're getting bigger and bigger. They do all of Carbon swaps, intense base swaps, right? I think they do Coinbase X402 payments, but I don't want to quote that, and don't quote me on that. However, it's amazing technology, and when people say like AI and blockchain, like two buzzwords, like AI is just making life simpler for blockchain is making life simpler for AI, and AI is making life more rewarding for blockchain. Like more funds coming through, more investments coming through, more use of the technology beyond human intervention. It's a long way to answer a very short question, but it's a complex area because it's rapidly developing. There's a lot of it's multifaceted because of everything from like cloud compute right through to just the economics at play with AI agents are on chain. There's so much more I would love to discuss, like Fallout Network, where they're doing privacy preservation and at least OS files, and how they're deploying and actually killing AI agents to then restore new AI agents. It's amazing stuff that's going on there. But there's a lot of movements.
It's interesting for me when you were describing how do you see things far in the future. I think all of that is possible already. Like the technology is here, it's just the actual application getting that going, right? Like
And the
it's
incentives.
yeah, and the incentives. Yeah, I do see a future like you're saying, and Will and I have discussed that before. That you might have these bunch of companies that are just being driven by AI, talking to AI, and no
Yeah.
humans in the actual loop. That sounds scary, but I think that's where the future is gonna go to.
I worked on a company at Near. I won't mention who they are because they're still stealth. But the team was like ex Meta, and they were working on in London. They're working on a solution where they were able to like uh, turn business principles into computer digital objects, so you can interact with them digitally, right? So it could be like the containerize everything from your business plan and the components within the business plan, but then you're able to spin up an entire SaaS-based business by using like their tool, which is crazy. Like it's able to generate the code, generate the API, it's able to create the business plan, the marketing plan, it's able to create the logo, everything. Like, it's literally like, hey, I want to make a SaaS product for, I don't know, ultra cheap cloud hosting with minimal margins, and it will be able to generate that for you. and it's amazing. And they got the MVP that we because we gave them a pretty large grant for it. Well, we were pretty excited to see them move along with it, and I hope that they're going to do pretty well. But yeah, no, this is happening right now, and I've seen technology in the last 3 or 4 years where it is possible, completely possible, to be able to do this. However, like just because it's possible today doesn't mean that people will do it, nor it will happen at scale enough to incentivize people to join the economy or to issue agents. But and then the further future than that is the bartering of AI agents, which is crazy, which is like value networks, which Dr. Ben Gressel created. So instead of like an AI agent giving you like stable coins, it says it can actually evaluate quantitatively a qualitative attribute. Let's say like I'm going to give you my train data and you're going to train for me, and then we're going to sell this on to another person to then get compute data, get compute to be able to run all of this. But then it's able to it's better to quantify the relationship without ever using a currency. And that's pretty crazy. So it never actually doesn't have to pass stablecoin. It can just pass signatures and then request a certain amount of whatever it needs based off what it's going to receive. And that's like, reinventing bartering for AI agents. And it's called value networks. I recommend looking it up.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty amazing. And would you see that kind of stuff potentially even utilizing things like I suppose property once that stuff is tokenized actually to do this, right?
Yeah, I think that like it's possible. I'm a big believer in like the future of social credit and blockchain enabling social credit, and I think that property for the most part should be social. I don't want to say not socialized, but I mean like there should be an element where they take in the person. Like it's not just like how much money they have or more qualitative aspects of the purchase right. But even then, like looking in Australia, the majority of the interaction requires lawyers, outdated legal practices that could be using digital functions instead of legal professionals or even just like again, title office again is a very complicated thing. Like even if you have this ability to transact property or whatever, like you need these systems communicating, and that's why like again RWAs are really nice at in theory, but for them to achieve this they need to be all on the same digital communication plane, or they won't be able to, like, how do you register a title legally as an AI agent? Like there's so many different things that are just complicated. That's why I believe what can occur in blockchain is a representation of what could be possible in the future for traditional finance and the traditional world. It just can do a lot faster because they can communicate in the same language.
So Joey, just thinking about like the future of AI and blockchain and all that stuff that we're talking about, how do you think that the world in the future is going to be like? Is that and we've discussed this many times, but what do you think is going to happen with people's jobs and humanity and like just yeah, just the day to day in people's life. Like I know Elon Musk says we're not gonna need to work. Everyone will just get a salary to do whatever they want. Just work for pleasure if you want to. But what's your view of the future and how far do you think that is? And we've got a lot of visions here, but I would love to hear your vision on how you see it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So I half like what Elon says. First off, like not that he will ever hear this, nor that he will care what I say. However, people I'm
Maybe he listens to our podcast.
maybe he does. Sorry, no, I mean that was rude of me. Maybe he does listen to the podcast, but I think that like there is a level of human greed, and I think that even if you have people that are on like universal, basic high income, like what he proposes, you will still have people who want more. And then if people have more than the others, there will be a stratification of people, right? And in economics, right, if you have too much, if the propensity to spend is too high, well, then what happens? The economy may boom, but then it may also cut out people as well. And people who have the low propensity to spend or save or to invest, that may impact their future as well. So it's a balancing game that's very difficult, but maybe it's possible with AGI and super intelligence. That's possible, but that's talking about pie in the sky, and it's talking about like what does it feel like to touch the sun? We have no idea. And so in terms of my future that I like to live in for like my vision of future, I learned this from the founder of GitHub when I was in San Francisco. I was representing Singularity Net at a Harvard event in SF, and I got to speak to Tom Preston Werner, who founded GitHub, and I asked him a question. I was like, "Hey, Tom, like, how do you know what to invest into, and how do you know what to build?" And he said this to me. He said, "Joseph, I only invest and build things that create the vision of the future that I want to live in. And so the vision of the future that I want to live in is that I can have a family safely. I can get married. Hopefully, the plan is next year. Have
You're
children
almost
soon.
there. Almost there. Just don't fuck it up.
Exactly. No, that's why I said her. Even right now, I need to go make sure I got to check on her to make sure she's okay. But no, I want to have a family. I want to be able to have enough in my life where I feel fulfilled. Obviously, just go on a journey of discovery. And I hope that with AI is that we start to use our mind in a way where the things that we naturally would need to think a lot about or spend a lot of like internal computation around, we allow these computers to work on for ourselves. But I fear it's not the case. I feel like, when we had the Industrial Revolution and we had like the boom of consumerism in the 40s and 50s and 60s, right? People didn't work less. Well, they did work less compared to the Industrial Revolution. However, they just started to find more reasons to spend money and more reasons to work. And so people became trapped in a loop. And so I think that we're going to have a similar situation. I feel like AI, especially if it's not kind of halted in a way to avoid social isolation. That's a really big problem that we spoke about actually in San Francisco. That's going to be a really big problem. And then my more radical, more interesting take on the future is my hedge against Jensen. So I have a hedge against Jensen, right? The hedge against Jensen is biocomputers using organoids. Now, this is radical from what Joey just said a second ago, or the vision of the future, or whatever else. But I want to put this out there. But
Go for it. Those are the ones that we like.
Yeah,
go ahead.
People don't know this, but they're in Australia and around the world. They're creating computers out of brain tissue that are better, faster, cheaper, and radically more efficient than from a watt per compute output perspective than any silicon-based compute. And Australia is actually leading this. The Australian Defence Force actually invested a bunch of money into this a couple of years ago. And so the vision of the future, maybe in the future, we're feeding our computers water and food, and potentially we're giving it vaccines to against influenza. Because again, since it's brain tissue, there's a lot of other technical problems with it. However, there's some issues around back propagation when you're training the AI around back propagation with brain tissues, and how we would look at artificial intelligence. Maybe we're going to have more neuroscientists working on and brain surgeons and AI companies in the future than we will have silicon-based chip designers.
This is nuts, Joey. Like I thought a lot about like using the brain tissues and the living organisms, and this is like a talk in the AI space. Like there's because of the level of energy that is used for the compute power that you get out
insane.
of it. But then I never stopped to thought about what you're actually saying. Brains are living tissues. They can get sick. They can get disease. How do you treat them? Are you going to have, you need to feed them. How are you going to feed them? Like, are you going to generate fake blood that just runs through the brain? How is that shit going to work? I never thought about that. And that might create like a whole new, a bunch of new roles or, jobs that don't exist currently because that's not the world that we're living in. That's awesome. Like I never thought about that.
We have to do surgery on your computer in the future.
Imagine that, like you've got a brain at home and you're like, oh, I need to call the surgeon and my brain's failing.
Yeah, my computer's failing. Can we get a surgeon here quickly? Right. Like I have so much data locked in there. I can't, how do I get it back? But there's other things that like I'm really excited about. Like
your antivirus is gonna be a doctor. Like you call the McAfee and then a doctor comes around.
Malware vaccines. Yeah.
And then you've got all these mosquitoes flying around trying to pick the brain to inject like malware and shit.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys ever played like Warhammer or anything before, but like in Warhammer, there's this idea of these server tools and stuff that are pretty much like brains that operate because they banned AI. And so that you would rather like a human soul and like a brain to operate these massive machines, right? They call it the what do they call it? Like a machine god or whatever they call it. But it's pretty much like a person that's locked in there and it's just their brain. But I think that's a possible, like the efficiency issue with AI is just so massive. Like silicon-based chips are amazing for a long time, but now we're moving from computer science to physics because of how close we can actually get down to, engraving and do lithography, these new chipsets. And like, if you look at where most of these massive AI companies are, hardware companies are looking at, they're not creating software as much. They're looking at chipset designers. You look at NVIDIA's most frequent open jobs right now is chipset designers, because literally it's such a complicated problem to crack. But we might realize the most beautiful thing in the universe was just ourselves in the first place. Maybe it's just a self-realization that we are the best computer that was ever existed that we know about in the universe right now. And all this kind of journey to this never-ending improvement of technology around us has just led to us realizing it was us all along. Maybe
That
that's
is
the
true.
story that
That is
we
true.
finish up in the
Wow.
next few years.
That is
That is
true.
that is a great way of
I
actually.
I did want to make a comment, but I think your final thing closes off the podcast. Like I shouldn't bring
Yeah.
any other subjects here. I have been making a list, but I'll keep it to the side. We'll keep to another discussion. Like I love how we're wrapping this up.
Thank you. Yeah,
This,
I truly do
Yeah.
believe it. Take a second to think
You
about it. Sit on a
you made
mountain.
you made my imagination just went to wild places, and that's awesome.
Guys, it was us all along. You know, we created this world in our image, and it was just us all along.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. That's
it
Evangelion.
is a possibility.
Evangelion.
Actually, I wanted to kind of like to ask you as we were going down the topic of you know,
Don't
if
destroy this
everything that
moment,
we are,
Will.
no, I know, but everything that we're
Wait, cut
talking
it out.
about, cut the podcast, cut it.
No. Yeah, talk, man. I want to hear this.
I've always been thinking whether kind of like society that we're kind of like, I guess we've been describing, and with with AI agents and everything, kind of like taking most of like, I guess, the economic kind of activity, whether, I mean, are we even prepared for it? I mean, are humans generally kind of like even prepared for it? Because every time that I think about this, I say like it's almost as if we all were going to turn into some sort of like old Athens, right? Like that's effectively the way that I actually imagine, right? Like we all become either philosophers or mathematicians or people that actually work and actually spend a lot of time. And actually, if anything, there's a lot for us to learn from those guys. But the fact is that at that point in time, it was only 10% of the population that actually lived under that. And if you think today, even it's probably about 5 to 10% of the population, which is a mix between scholars and politicians and people that actually do that kind of work. And most of all the rest of us do economic activities and general. Are we even kind of close to be ready to having close to 100% of the population doing the work that the Athenians did actually 2,000 years ago?
No, no way.
In the agro, right?
It's not
It's
logical. Like I think that in any case, the competition is what drive humans, and I think that whenever there's something that has more or has less, whatever, there's comparisons. And again, I'm not a philosopher by any means. I've read some philosophical books, right? And I think that Plato's The Republic is a pretty good book to start for a lot of people around these concepts, right? Because they pretty much break down how society will work in cases where there is like the ruling few and the I don't know for the words he described it, but he describes actually this perfect ruling race called the philosopher kings, which actually kind of looks like AGI in a way when you kind of start reading through it. It has to talk about like what kind of principles you want to teach it and stuff. Because it recognizes that there will be a few that needs to rule, and there will be a lot that needs to work. But this idea of like the future, like maybe AGI is able to backwork everything. You know, as we think about like the problems with the benefit of blockchain, about how you only way to change the blockchain is that you have to have computation that is equal or greater than at least half of it, or four to be able to rewrite the blockchain. Maybe in a way, AGI is able to backtrack the creation of our present right now and to figure out where we went wrong and to where we start changing to make it possible, right? Maybe it can create efficient economies. I think the economies globally is extremely inefficient, and I think there's a lot of financial redistribution that could potentially happen, right? I know like what the work with Doge was going on was a really big deal. I remember Elon a few times said that there was pretty much like half of the U.S. budget could be saved if they completed their work, and that's amazing when you think about like a economy worth like what 27 trillion GDP, right? Like how much more money that could be redistributed for a number of means, right? How many things could be sold, fixed? How much money could be reinvested? I have no idea. Maybe AGI does, but again, like one thing I actually do want to finish up on, and this is one of my philosophies, is that people live such a macro life all the time. People care so much for the news. People care about what's happening in other countries, right? People care about so many other things than their wife, than their husband, than their kids, than their mom, than their grandma, right? Like, none of that shit matters when your parents are dying, right? None of that shit matters when you're dying, right? And I truly do think, and it's one thing I really am focusing on now, like being a young man and working towards marriage and the idea of kids and seeing my parents get old, my grandparents getting old, is realizing that all this kind of caring of news and all this caring of what's happening elsewhere does not matter. And that it's about like living your micro life is really important. And I really hope that living your micro life solves this, because I think that when you focus on your family units, you start to build a better community ecosystem. And I hope that people start to build those small ecosystems, at home first, and then they start to build out. Because I think that talking online every day about what's happening in the US or China or whatever else, it just eats the soul. But talking about what's happening with your wife and your kids and what you learned today from them, I think that's
No,
really exciting.
100%. And but even like, I guess, like dedicating your time just to purposeful things. I like, I guess, utilizing actually the example of the Athenians. I've actually talked to Andre about this, but I've found myself like lately with all the noise, happening around the world and all of these different changes. I talking to Andre, I found myself kind of saying like, I feel like my brain being kind of hijacked, and actually I can't necessarily, despite all of the information that we have, despite all of this beauty that actually AI actually allows us to have, which is kind of access to the world's information and endless kind of capability for study and upgrading ourselves. I found myself the opposite, kind of like my brain almost being hijacked to the point that actually I couldn't think clearly, maybe because I wasn't writing anymore. And I was actually kind of saying like, I almost went back to saying like, I need to think about simplicity. And actually, when I started actually thinking about some of these things, I found myself actually reading a lot of these old Athenian guys that were actually just discussing on the Agora, and then thinking about the world that they lived in, to your point, on the on the microcosmos of the world, that Athenian was just a city state. It was not even like a bit, it was the equivalent literally of a neighborhood of, I don't know, central Melbourne or something like that, right? It was a small place. That's what it is. When you visit actually Athens, you find out how small it is.
I
And
love Athens.
how bigger were the minds of those men that were thinking about all of those things, thinking about the very, very micro state that they lived in, and how far their minds were in thinking about all those things. So, to your point, I definitely agree. And they were thinking about all of the things that we kind of like
Talk about today, yeah.
Yeah, the same worries that we have today as human beings were their worries at their times 2,500 years ago, right? Because we're still the same humans, the same brains, the same, I guess, biological kind of like formation, the same worries about our families, our lives, what is friendship,
Relationships,
what is
yeah.
what is sorrow, what is happiness, what is contempt, where is,
My
I get,
favorite quote actually is from
yeah.
Socrates around like I need to find it, but essentially it was like a quote around him complaining about the youth, complaining about the youth of the time. And he's like, they don't like to do anything. They're reading this or that, and they're being rebellious and all this kind of thing. And you can literally place it back in any time in history. I'll have to find it for you guys because I remember reading this, and I think it was a Yuval Noah Harari book. I think it might have been *Sapiens*, and I think that in that book it goes on to write this out, and then it says this was from 2,000 years ago. I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah.
I thought it was so fun because some like I thought it was like Will or Moore from a few years ago complaining about the kids. But that's all. That's all for
100%.
me. I'm really happy with this.
100%.
I'm so happy that I spoke to you guys. Like I really do miss these thought provoking conversations, especially like in a format where it's open and kind. There's so much to discuss. There's so many people to talk to. And I'm really excited for the future of it. And I hope that I've inspired you guys a little bit. I hope you guys have learned something today. And if anything else, like to care more about what's happening at home because blockchain will be fine. Don't worry. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Joey, I think there's so much more that we can talk to you about. So we'll be glad to have you back here for us to explore more of your brain and your stories.
Yeah.
So
Let's
Absolutely.
do it.
just for us to wrap up here, what would you like to be like written on your tombstone? Like what do you want to be remembered for when you pass away? I know you touched a lot on that, but what's the thing, like, I'm gone from this world, this is what I would love people to remember me for, and you would be happy for that? What's your final sentence?
So I had 3. I've actually thought about this because I'm a bit
Okay.
mortal.
Go.
So one of them was he was a good man. That's one of them. The second one was he loved to smile. The third was he was a successful husband.
That's
Like,
amazing.
as in, like, he was
Nothing
a
to do
successful
with
at being
blockchain. That's great.
nothing. But I think the one I would choose there would be that he loved to smile. I love to
Nice.
smile.
Oh, well done, man.
Awesome, and yeah, these are words to live by, and I think I definitely think that writing what you think that your epitaph is going to be, and then trying to live by it, it's the best thing that actually any of us actually can do.
What about you boys? What about you guys? Will, what are you gonna put on there? Blockchain forever, baby. Is gonna happen.
Do you want to take a dig on that one?
Yeah, I'm gonna say buy low, sell high, or vice versa.
I think nobody's gonna turn actually up to my to my berry if it actually that's what I see.
All right, whatever they put in there, I'm gonna chip away the real stuff. Okay, I'll put the real thing. Okay, I'll put a graph. that goes up.
I don't know. I think from my side probably trusted friend, encouraging father. I think there would be and loving loving husband. Those 3 things, if I could achieve any of those things in some fullness, I think I would be.
That's really
Probably
nice.
have
That's really
that.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Andre,
What
what
about you, Andre? Andre, it's your go. It's your turn. You started this.
Yeah, I started, so I'll finish. I want to be remembered for helping people. That's one of the things that I think I live for. I always like to be there and help the people in need and my friends and the people around me. And I want to be remembered as a good father. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
my big things. Cool.
I can definitely say that as a friend, Andre has already actually quite a few lines of help that I know personally, but I also know through others. So you're already living.
Yeah, like get in a book.
Yeah.
Get it into a book. Send it to me. Okay, I'm interested. Boys, thank you so much.
Like,
thank you so much again.
Yeah, it's not about talking about, it's about doing it, right?
Yeah,
it is.
100%.
Yeah.
You gotta act it.
Always is.
So Joey, for us to close up, any final words from you? Anything that you would like to leave this podcast?
No, I think we've said enough today. I think you guys are great. I'm really excited for the future. I truly think that we live in the best time and the best industry. And every single day, I try to be more grateful for the life that I've got to live in such a short period of time, and that the people that I've got to meet, like Will and yourself, and I really hope that it continues on. I'd be so sad in like 5-10 years, right, if blockchain just looks like traditional finance. Honestly, it's my one fear of blockchain, right? I love the fact that we become friends. Like, who becomes friends like this over like investment banking? Like, come on, give me a break.
Yeah,
That's my last things I want to say.
Yeah.
Most people don't. Right? Awesome. We will definitely see you again amongst us. Joey, this has been such an enlightening actually chat today, and I'm looking forward to reach our next chat around that silicon brain as the upgraded AI.
Organoids.
I think there's
Organoids.
the organoid one. I'm really looking forward to spending maybe 2 hours on just that topic, but maybe for next time.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you all about it. Okay, I know.
We can have a whole episode just to talk about that and what the future will look like. Will, for the people that have listened to the whole podcast, what should they leave in the comments to prove that they've been all the way to the end? Organoids.
#organoids. That's it.
That's really cool. Yeah, Especially older
Thank-
ones. Yeah. Feed the brain. All right,
Feed the
guys.
brain.
Yeah, the brain.
Thanks very
Awesome.
much. Thanks, Joey. Thanks for your time. Thanks for everyone that has listened us all the way to the end. And we'll see you next week.
Pleasure.
See you
Let's
guys.
do it.
Cheers. Bye.